Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 12 Faces of Sober Speaks podcast, episode 45. I am your host, Kenneth L. Watson Jr. We have another great guest on here. Her name is Kezia. Before I jump into the interview, I would like to dedicate today's episode to an Army brother that I lost last week to gun violence, Luther Figs. May you rest in peace. I have talked a lot on my podcast in regards to domestic violence, and I'm not going to let today go by without saying these things. If you are in an abusive relationship, regardless of if you're the one that's initiating it or you're the one that's receiving it, try your best to walk away before you end up behind bars, end up, hurting someone or losing your life. No one's life is meant to be taken because you're upset in a relationship and not happy. I'm not a professional. I'm just a victim of domestic violence. And it took a while for me to get out of a situation. And let me just say that 5 years and 6 months and 10 or 11 days is a reason why I had to walk away from a domestic violence situation. So I don't want to, continue to say RIP, but that's one thing that I would say. So Luther Figs, this is for you, brother, and, forever in my heart. So, but enough of that. I have, you guys can get the merch, 12 Faces of Sober. You can go on 12facessober.com. You can order a signed copy of 12 Faces of Sober. You can also order merchandise. I have hoodies, t-shirts, tights for women, workout shorts for women, coffee mugs, etc. And you can also order the book on Amazon. All you have to do is type in 12 Faces of Sober, and the book is available there. My book became a bestseller February 22nd of 2022. And I am definitely thankful for that. It was on the bestseller list, #1 for roughly about 72 hours. So like I said, it's a great book. It's about myself. The number 12 does not associate with the AA principles. It's more or less when I started drinking the first time I got drunk was at 12, and I also battled alcoholism for 12 years. So that's where the 12 and 12 Faces Sober came from. So today's guest is, like I said, Kezia. I saw her post or her page probably about a month, if not a couple of weeks ago. And before I usually reach out to someone to be on the show, I kind of just scoured through the page. I might not hit a like, I might not hit a comment, but I more or less read and see what they're doing. What is their message? Is it something positive that I would like to have on 12 Faces Sober so that it can potentially help someone that might still be struggling or someone that is early in sobriety? And she definitely is one of those people. And I wanted to have her on the show so that she can share her story and also share some of her inspiring words. But just know, I am going to ask about a few of her posts. So just, stay tuned to that and potentially help you, follow her and see, the positive message that she does have going on. So like I said, welcome Kezia to 12 Faces Sober Speaks podcast. And so what we'll do is we'll just have you, share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive right into the interview. So welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. And before I start, I just wanted to say condolences for the loss of your friend. I saw that on your social media, and you're right. This doesn't need to happen, and there is always a way out. And I say that to people about getting sober as well. I think there is always hope, and just spreading that awareness is really important. So condolences, and also thank you for spreading that awareness and using your voice that way. I'm grateful to be here this morning, and I'm looking forward to connecting with your guests, and I'm curious to see what posts that you're gonna bring up. I post every single day, so it's hard to know, what hits for some people, doesn't hit for other people, and things like that. So yeah.
Most definitely. So let's start back in the past. Let's talk about you growing up. Was alcohol present in your home? Was that something that you witnessed? I know that a lot of people like myself and past guests, they do discuss, you know, alcohol being present in the home, if it's a parent or if it's a family member. So how was that for you growing up?
Yeah, alcohol didn't play a huge role in my upbringing, to be honest. It was something that I think my parents and the adults in my life, like relatives and stuff, celebrated with alcohol, or there'd be like, you know, special occasions and things like that. I do have a couple of uncles who struggle with it that I know of now, but at the time it wasn't something, there was no red flags around alcohol, and it just wasn't, it wasn't at the front of my mind for any reason. And in reality, actually, growing up, I only drank alcohol once in high school. And it was like my boyfriend at the time and we threw like a house party at my house when my parents were out one night. And I drank Mike's Hard Lemonade and ended up getting drunk off that, or I think I was drunk, I don't know. And I got in huge trouble for having that party, and I just never, it never crossed my mind again. So that was my only exposure to it. I didn't really run with the crowd that was the popular people that were drinking, quote unquote. So yeah.
And I noticed you have
Yeah.
an accent. Where exactly are you? Where exactly are
Yes.
you from? Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there first.
I'm Canadian. I'm born and raised in Alberta, which is on the west side of the country next to British Columbia. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up there, but I moved out of home, and then I moved to England for 7 years in my early 20s. So I only lived there growing up, and then for a few years sporadically after that. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
so when, you know, you said you experimented with drinking a Mike's Hard Lemonade. So when
Yeah.
did alcohol kind of, you know, not so much take over your life, but when did you think that alcohol itself became a problem?
You know, if I look back now, I think in my 20s when I was living overseas, I think it was like a cause to celebrate, or it was like going out with girlfriends and we would meet up for a couple bottles of wine or things like that, but it still wasn't at the front of my mind. I did a lot of traveling when I was living overseas, and that was kind of my priority for me when drinking really took off. So I turned 40 last year, and my drinking took off when I became a single parent, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but I was 33 when I had my daughter, and that's really kind of when it all started. So it was sort of condensed into like this small period of time, but the catalyst for that, what for wanting to get sober, was having my daughter. But that's actually, it like got worse before it got better. So I had been drinking, I'd say from like 29 or 30 pretty hard up until when I quit. Yeah.
And then you mentioned being overseas. Now, I haven't had the luxury to travel a whole lot. I mean, I've been to South Africa, but I did that sober. Now, how is it like the climate in other countries as far as drinking? I know some countries, it's, you know, it's night and day and night, middle of the night. So how was that, the culture when you were?
Yeah, that's a good question. The England where I lived has a big binge drinking kind of culture. And I worked actually in the service industry. I worked in restaurants and pubs and bars when I moved there because I had a certain type of visa. So I was going to night school, doing my undergrad in English literature, and then I was working in like bars and restaurants. And they're huge culture of binge drinking, and really it starts pretty young too. Like if you go to pubs and stuff there, you'll see lots of families there, you'll see lots of young kids being exposed to drinking at a young age, or seeing their parents in varying degrees of intoxication and stuff. It's a lot more like out in the open. You can drink in the streets when I was living there. I think you still can, and in public. So it's definitely a different culture. We binge drink here in North America, but it's like more acceptable there at that point. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And I'm assuming that the drinking age is not 21 over there either.
No, and where I grew up in Canada, it wasn't either. It was 18 where I lived. For the last 10 years before we immigrated here, my daughter and I, my husband's American, the legal age in Toronto where we lived was 19, I think. And you could drive when you were, where I grew up, you could get your learners when you were 14. I think about it now and I'm like, that is too young to be operating a motor vehicle. And it's mind boggling. But at the time, you take all those opportunities, right? You want to kind of do all those things. So, yeah.
So you mentioned environment as some of the things that you witnessed, and you're in your late 20s, and so was drinking something that was because of the culture where they were binge drinking? Did you find yourself in that type of situation, or was it just like something that just eventually evolved into that?
Good question. I think for me, it evolved into that, but the trigger or kind of the catalyst for that was I was in a long-term relationship when I lived overseas, and we were together for close to 7 years. That broke down and I ended up moving back to Canada, and it happened at the same time. And I felt really lost at looking back on it now. And I kind of went on this mission to, make friends, make a new identity for myself, figure out where my place of belonging was in the world. And I did actually start getting into this culture of like going out every weekend with a few girlfriends that I had made, hooking up with random people, kind of like in that party lifestyle. But I didn't realize that that was the reason it was happening. I just thought I was free, like I was like, oh, I'm just embracing my single life. So that happened.
Now, did you, because when we're in that type of situation, kind of living free, did you have a feeling of like, okay, this could be like some type of consequences, coming up, you put yourself in situations with men, random people that you may meet. It could, lead to some type of violence, any type of thing. Did you run into any of that, during that time of, having fun on the weekends?
I don't think so, although there were things that happened that were quite worrying. I was starting to experience blackouts sometimes when I was drinking, but I didn't realize that at the time either. I just thought I was really drunk, right? And the people I was partying with, it was very acceptable because the same thing was happening to them. But yes, to answer your question, I did put myself in situations where 100% I could have been in danger or at risk because I was intoxicated and with people I didn't know or with strangers or things like that. And I lived on my own. I was working a very high-powered job in human resources. I was making a lot of money. And I just thought I was living, the Carrie Bradshaw Sex in the City kind of like, vibe. But it was very dangerous if I look back on it now. There was situations that I put myself in which then stopped for that period of time. And then this cycle started again when I started drinking, when I became a single parent. So if I look now, I'm like, oh, that pattern repeated itself. There was just a little hiatus in the middle. Yeah.
And you just mentioned being a single parent. Now, was that just like the separation of your partner in terms of where it enhanced, like, a breakup type situation where, you picked up drinking again? Like, so how did that go?
Yeah, him and I unfortunately had a fairly toxic relationship based in substance abuse and addiction from the beginning. So things took off. We met, he's like 8 years younger than me, and we met at a time when I was starting to party again. I'd moved to the west coast of Canada, moved to a party place there called Kelowna, and him and I were on this kind of like hamster wheel of like just partying all the time, not really showing up for work, that kind of stuff. So when we made the decision to move all the way across the country, I'm like, oh, this will change things. Like we'll slow down, we'll settle down. But no, things, they talk about the geographic kind of aspect of like trying to outrun your addiction or whatever. And it actually got worse, mostly because he was mentally abusive and emotionally abusive. He's a narcissist. And I think I didn't realize that. I didn't have the language to realize what he was doing and who he was to me. I just felt trapped in our relationship. So before I got pregnant, I was partying and drinking, stopped when I got pregnant. I didn't abuse anything when I was pregnant with her. And then I became a single parent when she was 10 months old. And then I just started drinking and partying with people again and going out, every weekend that I didn't have her. So it just picked right back up, but it was worse. I think it was worse. I just went harder, Yeah.
Yeah. And did you like during that time, did you face any type of like depression, any mental health issues? I guess one would be, that postpartum that women go through. I guess I'm not a professional, I don't know, but the postpartum, and even just the separation in your relationship, even though it might have been, as you say, a fast-paced type thing, and but you had some type of feelings for that person, and now that person is no longer in your life. So did you struggle? Did you have any struggles with that?
Yeah, I was struggling with undiagnosed postpartum. I didn't realize that that's what it was, and I didn't have a proper healthcare provider when I was going through my pregnancy. I guess I had my doctor, but I wasn't honest with her about anything. So I kind of cycled on and off of an antidepressant for, like over 5 years, and I never stuck with it. Plus I drank when I was taking it, so it never worked properly. In sobriety now, I realize there's a couple of things that happened. I actually have ADHD. And it goes undiagnosed in women, especially it can go for a very long time, but it explained a lot of things that happened in my life. Like I wasn't able to, for example, hold down a job properly. Even though I was very successful in the jobs that I had, I would get bored and I would want something else. That was a symptom of my ADHD. So I had that. And then I also have anxiety. And that was my main thing. So not depression so much, although the alcohol caused me to be depressed. Now that the alcohol is gone, there's no depression at all. I'm not on any medication for anything. Even my ADHD, I'm not. But yeah, at the time there was definitely depression, and it was definitely dangerous because I would get into a funk of days and days of feeling worthless. Yeah.
So when did you feel that your drinking was a problem?
In the summer of, before this, it was before 2019. It was probably in like 2018. I started noticing that I was becoming more physically dependent on alcohol, and I was buying it more often to keep in the house. I was kind of drinking more on my own. So like I'd pre-drink before I would go out with friends on the weekend. I needed that like extra security blanket before I'd be in social situations, which I now understand is what causes my anxiety a lot of the times, is those social situations. But I didn't realize that I was drinking over that. So 2018, I started thinking, oh, this is, I don't want to be doing this. I had no control over it. And I was a daily drinker. And then I was a morning drinker at the end of it for over a year. But I was summer of 2019, I was going to the gym every day, and a podcast, I found a podcast called Home with Laura McCowan, who wrote We Are the Luckiest, and Holly. And I started binge listening to it, and they were both sober. And this was before like the whole kind of movement that we have now with Sober Curious and very strong female role models in our space here. But I was just like, okay, they're doing it. How can I figure out how to do this? And I ended up in the ER with withdrawal symptoms multiple times in that 2-year span, because I just would think I had it beat. I would get prescribed benzos and stuff. I would take them and stop drinking for, a week, and then I'd slowly start drinking again. And it was a very vicious cycle.
Now,
Yeah,
did you?
it was a few years.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was a few years from when I thought in my mind, probably 2018, 2017, even really, but I thought in my mind, I started like turning down invitations to go out to events with people because I knew that I couldn't control myself. I became a bit of a recluse, but then what ended up happening is I would just drink on my own. So the drinking still escalated because I wasn't dealing with the underlying issues that were causing me to drink to cope with things and to try and, soothe myself. So yeah, it was a few years of that kind of hell of going back and forth and never really actually quitting. Like, people talk about day ones. It's like, I might have had day ones, when I was prescribed those meds, for example, if I went to the ER, but then I would end up right back there. I would just taper myself off, or not even, I would just go off with them, which, by the way, to anyone listening, is so dangerous. And this is not something that I ever would recommend doing. It's very dangerous to mix those things. Yeah.
Did you find yourself having to go to any detox centers? I've been to detox, I've been to rehab. So did you have to did you experience that at all throughout any period of time of your drinking, or even leading up to you getting sober?
No, I didn't. But I 100% believe that I should have, because the way I did it at home was very dangerous, and it didn't work because I tried multiple times to do it. I had this idea in my head that there was a lot of shame around and a lot of stigma around people going to rehab and people needing medical detox. And there was no mistake about it. I was physically dependent on alcohol, and I was going through neurological stuff when I was coming off of it. I remember a good friend of mine needed me to come to the courthouse with her to sign some divorce paperwork. And this was like near the end of my drinking, and my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't get through doing it. But like, nobody noticed. But that day I said, I need you to take me to the ER. And I just told her I was having a panic attack. Well, I was having a panic attack, but it was caused by my alcoholism, right? So I did not go to anywhere, but the other thing that stopped me from doing that is I was a single parent living in pretty impoverished situation at that point. I hadn't met my husband. I was in a kind of helpless loop with that, and there just weren't a lot of resources that I was aware of for me to get sober. So yeah, I 100% I should have gone to something.
And I wanted to kind of touch on what you just said, that it's interesting that, you, like you said, you went to the courthouse, your hand was shaking, nobody else noticed, but you did. You know what I'm saying? And that's what typically is like, that side effect of either coming down off of alcohol or you wanting to have some alcohol at that particular moment. And that is just your focal point, that the alcohol has that much control over your brain that it's like it's telling you, hey, I need this. You haven't had, I haven't had you in my body for some time. So please get me to the next alcohol as soon as possible. So I definitely like that you shared that. That's, to me, I want to, get those physical, certain things, like I said, the withdrawals that we experience, because it's a challenge, and even with me, like I've had the panic attacks. I've had to go to the hospital because of just, okay, my body hasn't had it in so long. So it's really good that you shared that.
Yeah.
So now you told me you got sober November 1st of 2020. How was that the day before? What was the day before like? So I guess that would be what, October 30th? How was October?
Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween, actually. Yeah. Halloween was typically one of my biggest drinking nights of the year. I had one girlfriend in particular loved making costumes, and we'd get all dressed up. We'd go to like the biggest bar and we'd have the biggest night. Both of us would be so drunk. She'd drive home every time, like just really, we'd go meet people and go to after parties. And for like the 2 years before that, like I was talking about in like 2018, I kind of would blow her off every Halloween because I just like didn't trust myself, you know? And so I'd blown her off again and she was pissed. And I was at home. My daughter was at her grandparents' for the weekend. And I was just drinking on my own like I usually do. And it actually wasn't one of the most like crazy drinking times. I think what happened in that last year is my body was so exhausted from drinking all the time. Like I didn't want to, but physically I had to. So it just like became this huge cycle. So anyway, so I there was this voice in my head that had been there before, and it was just saying like, it's time for you to try and put this down. And I still had to go through the process after that of being honest actually with my therapist, who was she's a GP as well, my old therapist in Canada. And I had to she got the notes from the ER because I gave them permission to release it to her, saying that I had been in there for alcohol withdrawal. And so that was kind of the beginning of that. There was no huge crash and burn, but it was like this inner knowing and this voice that was just saying like, it's time, your daughter needs this, you need this, you're immigrating to the States in like a month, you have this opportunity to change your life in the way that you say that you want to. So that was that.
Okay. And you just mentioned moving to the States. I noticed on your page that you got married this year, or was that last year?
Got married last year. Yeah.
Congratulations. So how has life been now, obviously in a new relationship? How has that been for you?
Yeah. So we met in 2018 on Instagram, actually, on my old Instagram account. And we started chatting. We talked for 6 months over FaceTime and all this stuff before we met in person. And he was just my biggest support he can take alcohol or leave it. And in reality, he hasn't drank since last summer because he just doesn't need it, which was never me. I could never just be like, oh, I just want one, you know? So he fully now just doesn't drink because it's supportive. We don't keep alcohol in the house. We have a 7-year-old daughter. And it just, yeah, he being in a sober relationship, it's made him more aware of how prevalent alcohol is in our society. So he'll send me like stuff that I end up sharing in my stories, like ads on the Super Bowl or like things like that. Like, you know, look at this gambling ad and how much alcohol is there, or Buffalo Wild Wings, you know, has their whatever Long Island iced tea. And I'm like, it's crazy. I never noticed it when I was drinking, because that fully would have been me. Every time we went out, it was an excuse to have a drink, even with lunch, have 2 drinks, come home, drink more, you know? So it's been really beneficial to go through our first year of marriage as a sober couple, you know.
And I commend you on that too, because that's pretty much how I met my lady, or now my fiance. We met on Instagram, or not Instagram, but Facebook.
Yeah.
I had to be honest and was like, hey, look, drink. And she doesn't, I mean, she has drank in the past, but she doesn't drink. And that to me was like a deal breaker. And like, for me was like, I couldn't, really bring myself to be in a relationship with another person that drinks. And I'm nothing against it. It's just that I know that would lead me back to drinking. So I'm
me too.
And so salute to your husband for that, to, taking on that, as you guys grow together as a married couple. So I commend you guys for that. Most definitely. Now, so what is life like today, sober? How was that for you?
Life today is pretty peaceful, pretty calm. I started my own business at the beginning of this year, and I it's a creative business. I teach writing workshops, but it's more like healing workshops, but we use the vehicle of writing to help with that process. Writing has been so beneficial to help heal some of the trauma that I've had in my life through all of this stuff. I just recently found a therapist. So if you are in a position to have a therapist as well, but I've been trying for so long to find one. And I know a lot of people don't have that. But now I have my morning routine. I get up early. I just have a routine. And I think in all the chaos of drinking, I think what my body really wanted was that routine. I just didn't know how to find it. And alcohol will never help you get that because you're constantly in a state of flux and your body doesn't know what to expect. So now I exercise every day. I work out every day. I connect with other sober people through my platform. Like you see, it's very important to me, that kind of, I don't follow 12-step, but that kind of step about like service and being of service to others has been hugely gratifying, but also just humbling as well to hear other people's stories when they pop into my inbox and stuff like that. So it's a huge part of my recovery to continue to do that work. Even though I don't think about alcohol for myself every day, I try and never forget where I came from,
Mm-hmm.
So life is good.
Definitely. And what we're gonna do is, because we're almost short for time, I want to ask the questions about the quotes, and I want you to be able to, I want to say a couple of things, but I'm going to ask you one more question before we stop this recording, because Zoom is going to cut this off in about like 4 minutes. So my question to you is, what I like that you mentioned is, in the 12 steps, I know that there are a very good handful of people that follow that. And I like to hear both sides of it, because it's all about what works for you and what's going to keep you sober, and so I want to piggyback on that, like I said, I guess because I've been trying to truly quit, or was trying to stop drinking since 2008. And so I kind of had, was force fed the 12 steps. And so to hear that, okay, it may not have worked for you, or you took a different route, but it's still a positive route because you're still sober today. And you are, like you said, you're helping others, you're on other people's pages. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what's important, is that find whatever works for you. You know what I'm saying? The 12 steps is there, but there's there's other alternatives that can keep you, like I said, social media. Some people are on there, posting a lot of stuff daily, 5-10 times a day. So there's always information out there to get, it's just a matter of what works for you, and, do you like their message? And so most definitely. And I also wanted to touch on too, the importance of getting a therapist. If you do have the problems, you are facing a lot of different things. Some people can't afford it. But the thing is too, is that, you have people that are licensed, that are just starting out, independent businesses that are charging pretty much, low cost. And those people, will probably be just as good as someone that's, charging the hundreds and thousands of dollars. So don't let that be an excuse. You know what I'm saying? Some people will offer their services for free. It's just a matter of asking the questions. So we're going to stop there. Give me a couple minutes to create one more Zoom link real